button.
But so what I was saying though is, one thing that should be looked at pretty strongly, especially if you're in a buy and hold mentality, is how can you loan it out and earn it? Because if you're not going to move that Bitcoin,
right,
some custodian vendors like Celsius, suggesting there are some non-custodians, but then you'd really have to enter the Ethereum protocol, so you'd have to wrap that Bitcoin, which Nick and I were just talking about that. In theory, it's really challenging within in tax law, because a Bitcoin and a wrapped Bitcoin are technically not the same coin, and therefore, would would an accountant or does the IRS consider that an exchange for
a different asset?
Yeah, and therefore you have a tax gain on it, a tax event on it.
Right.
Which would prevent you from wrapping it. But, I think if you have a wrapped Bitcoin, you have the most opportunities in the Ethereum space and the just DeFi space in general. But if you have Bitcoin itself, you're kind of stuck using just some type of custodian.
Have any of you guys looked into that crypto.com site where they have I guess it's used like a debit card, and then you get interest on it depending upon what level of investment you make, and you can.
I'm not using it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, me too. I've definitely seen it. I mean, I feel like a lot of the interest opportunities right now, and we'll probably get into a lot of this tonight, is in the DeFi space on Ethereum, specifically on a lot of the layer 2 stuff. So within the last month or so, a lot of layer 2 networks have come online, and a lot of the larger apps have migrated to layer 2. Matic being in particular comes to mind that I know Craig and I have been using. And there's a lot of rewards happening right now on those networks that they're trying to like incentivize people to kind of use them and like bridge their assets to those networks.
Interesting.
But it's still rooted in Ethereum. So like the layer below it is still Ethereum.
Well, actually, there's a pretty nuanced challenge to that argument. I would say it's not rooted in Ethereum. It is its own blockchain. It uses Matic as its own consensus
side chain, right? It's like a
mechanism. What they're doing though is they're snapshotting the Matic blockchain and Merkle trees onto Ethereum on set increments.
Now, are they using for smart smart contracts, or is it for other?
Well, Matic is doing, they're fully EVM compatible, so it's.
That's what's really cool about this stuff is like we have the Long Island blockchain. We actually put together a smart contract that allows you to create tokens, and we have it online right now. And it's pretty cool because you could take that code that we've developed and deploy it to any EVM compatible blockchain. So there's a bunch of them now. I think it is Binance Chain. That's why I needed some Binance token, because I wanted to deploy that contract to it. You write the code pretty much once, and you can deploy it to all these different chains.
Wow.
And Matic is EVM compatible too. So we should deploy that to Matic. We haven't done that yet.
Plug a new coin for Matic. Okay, may as well.
Hey Ken, how you doing? Good to see you.
But as far as layer 2s. I'm sorry. That was a robot that just spoke. Hi, Ken. A couple of really cool ones that are out right now. Arbitrum is just launched on Ethereum, and Optimism is coming out, or did come out. It's coming out at the end of this month.
I believe so, yeah. Now, is that the same type of architecture? Are we still talking about a side chain with Optimism?
No. So optimistic rollups are actually using Ethereum as the consensus security, right? It has to use Ethereum as its own consensus, and therefore uses all of the miners and validators and the whole security mechanisms. Matic itself has its own set of validators and miners, and not on Ethereum. It's its own blockchain. Same as Binance BSC is on their own blockchain, run by their 21 delegated proof of stake miners.
So what exchanges do you guys use? Do you have any favorite exchanges?
Uniswap. Uniswap, and we've been playing with QuickSwap.
Okay.
But I shouldn't say none. I have a small fees that I keep, just on Coinbase, just for, looking around at their product. But typically, I operate only on the protocol itself.
Okay.
Which is super interesting, and I think a topic we like to discuss tonight is the the crash that just happened in this past month was pretty substantial, right? We saw a pretty steep decline in value. I think for most of us, like Beth, you were saying, that have been investing in crypto for many years now, we see this kind of cycle happening over and over again. It seems like it just kind of amplified each time, and I could feel it in my own emotions, where you say, like, I should sell some, where you're like, oh, you get this, like, oh, I should sell some, but like kind of going back to that core mind frame of like, this is the cycle that keeps happening here. But with the centralized exchanges in this last cycle, compared to now, we have all of these decentralized exchanges, these DEXs, which is like Uniswap and SushiSwap and all these other guys. They're basically smart contracts that are running on the chain itself. So you can call right into them. You don't have, like, if you know how to write software, you can call into these smart contracts using your own software. So you don't have to use their user interface. It's not this kind of like traditional software as a service product. They're running
to that point. That's why Uniswap has a version of their website on IPFS. So should uniswap.org ever go down, the community still will be able to call into these contracts. And should even if that IPFS website were to go down, for the developers that actually know how to call a contract from within the Ethereum protocol, the contract still exists. You don't need the front end provided by Uniswap. You don't need the front end provided by the IPFS, but it's certainly, I wouldn't know how to do it if I didn't have it.
yeah, it opens up accessibility for a wider demographic. But I mean, it seems like the centralized exchanges in this cycle, and this happens in every cycle, they were not accessible, right?
They're required to maintain certain liquidity ratios the same way banks are, right? So as liquidations took place or outflows or whatever, they have to stop trading to adhere to whatever regulation that they're governed by.
Oh, so was that? I thought it was more of a technical infrastructure thing. Like they couldn't access the web.
It's always that. Coinbase itself, their servers just crash.
Oh, well, their Coinbase is a mess.
Yeah, their servers are pretty bad. But Robinhood, if you remember during the Doge mania, they had to cease trading because they couldn't maintain the liquidity ratio, right? They
because they maxed out. They were putting out more than they were getting back in.
yeah, that was the whole GameStop thing, right?
The whole GameStop, and then AMC. I went on there. It was on the Reddit site. Wall Street Beats or whatever the hell they are. It was really interesting. Yeah, going and reading the Reddit feed.
Yeah, kind of a lot of what caused some of the crash, I would say, is the dog coin mania. You'll get it's funny, like 3 months we were literally at the same $32,000, and you see the charts, and it went 32,000, and we spiked up to 64,000. We stayed somewhere in that 60, and then we just crashed back down to the 30s. So but as you were saying, Nick, like those of us who are, a little bit more weathered to this, like I remember December, we were at $12,000. Yep.
Yeah, but you know what? On the other token, though. So on the other token, no pun intended. The centralized exchanges were not really too accessible for various reasons. But then the decentralized exchanges stood up, and all of the liquidity providers and stuff were able to kind of make a good amount of returns by kind of liquidating some of the assets that were in some of these pools and things. But, and this is a big but, gas prices were through the roof. So it was, even though it was accessible, it really wasn't, because it was very costly and if not impossible for a lot of folks to really trade during that time.
I can speak from experience. I had a transaction that went submitted to try and cover some liquidity on a seat on a debt collateral debt pool. So I was playing with MakerDAO. I opened up a collateral debt pool. We crashed to get my liquidation ratios down to really low numbers. I said, oh, well, that stinks. Let me try and, protect my asset here. And I had a transaction that just was too low gas. And then I had to like try and speed that transaction up to cancel, to then try and do it again. And it was miserable. It was a terrible experience.
Yeah, and that kind of I think that's where some of this level 2 stuff comes in. I mean, since we've been playing with Matt again, like it's a great feeling to just not have to worry about the gas fees. But in the same token, it's like that I guess the gas fees exist for a reason, because the consensus algorithm that we're using in Ethereum is distributed, right? It's not like this centralized kind of like.
I'd like to hope. I mean, we haven't talked about EIP 1559 on the Ethereum protocol at all. But,
Yeah.
There's two really significant components of that new improvement protocol. One is it's eliminating the market for Ethereum gas. So if any of you have used MetaMask and are submitting a transaction, you're basically auctioning for the miners to accept your transaction. You go in with like 50 Gwei and say, hey, I have this transaction. Here's 50 Gwei. If you can please accept my transaction, put it on the blockchain. But what's happening is people that have higher value, well, their transaction is worth more. So they're saying, well, I don't care about 50 Gwei. I'm going to offer 200 Gwei for all of my transactions.
Oh.
And these miners are saying, well, I don't want the 50 Gwei transaction. I want the 200 Gwei transaction. So I'm going to just accept all those 200 Gwei transactions. And everyone else is then going to have to continue to pump this auction market up for gas prices, probably unnecessarily. Like the blocks aren't even full, but people with low gas transactions just aren't getting in because they're not incentivizing enough.
Yep. Tachi does not like that,
Yeah, he's not a fan. So what EIP 1559 does, it's actually going to get rid of that market auction mechanism. Instead, what it's going to do is it's going to calculate based on how full the block is on the last block and how much gas was used. It's going to set the base price for the next block, right? So it's not necessarily, so instead it's just when you want to submit a transaction for the next block, you'll know exactly how much gas you need to submit in order to get, included in the next block, or, in the next 1 or 2 or 3 blocks, whatever
And the price is based on the fullness of the block, you're saying?
Yeah, there's something.
That's a part of it.
I didn't look at the mathematics, but based on how full the block is and how, will change the price of the base fee.
Huh.
And there's also something in that, as a transactor, I can add a tip into this, right? So instead of, if the base fee is 50 Gwei, I can pay my 50 Gwei. But let's say I really, really, really want to make sure my transaction wants to go into that very next block, not 2 blocks from now, I can put a tip in of another 100 Gwei, something like that.
Oh.
Like I can offer a bigger tip to incentivize miners to accept my transaction faster.
So now that this EIPP 15, is it? How?
EIP 1559.
1559. So how does someone utilize that? Is that on an exchange, or is that decentralized?
No, you'll still be using MetaMask.
Oh, you still would use MetaMask. Okay.
Yeah, MetaMask would definitely have to adjust, some of their UI, because the advanced features in MetaMask are where you set your gas prices. But now they're going to have to accommodate this tipping mechanism instead. So it's going to have to call out the base fee.
Yeah.
Isn't adjustable, right? It's no longer an adjustable number. So there'll definitely be some changes on the UI from MetaMask. So that's one component of EIP 1559, and probably the most significant from the UI UX perspective. Now, from a financial perspective, there's a whole other component, and that's what's currently happening is there are all sorts of fees in the transactions that currently take place in Ethereum, and those miners are getting them, right? Like, because where I'm accepting your transaction, I'm getting certain fees on top of base fees, etc. 1559 is actually going to say, we're going to burn that. It's going to say, hey, we're going to take that ether out of circulation instead of giving it to the miners, which really very strongly eliminates all the sell pressure, because when you give ether to a miner has to maintain its electrical usage, its business, etc.
Sell it.
He's going to sell it. He's forced to sell it to stay in business. But if we're just burning it instead, they don't have it to sell. In which case, all of the we have that isn't burned kind of appreciates in value because there's less of it out there.
That's interesting. So it really becomes deflationary at that point, instead of inflationary.
Well, there is a pretty strong goal. I mean, it will be an inflationary asset for some time. I mean, they're minimizing the issuance really significantly. You have a couple that are going to come into play that'll reduce the issuance. One is EIP 1559, and the other is moving from proof of work to proof of stake.
Mm-hmm.
Proof of work, in order to incentivize proof of workers, there's a pretty high issuance because there's a high cost of operating.
Mm-hmm.
But you move to something like proof of stake, as we were just talking about, you take your collateral and you put it somewhere, and it's just a hold mentality. We don't have to incentivize you all that much to stake your Ethereum because you held it anyway. So they're reducing the issuance on the staking mechanisms a pretty strong amount. So they're targeting something like 20 years from now will actually be deflationary in Ether. And they're targeting something like 100 million Ether as its total issuance. And they'll control that by the issuance that goes out when new blocks are created and the deflationary burning mechanisms of 1559.
And that's going to happen really soon, isn't it? Like we're talking next month, I believe. Is
1559 goes in probably end of next month. And proof of stake, I'll say February. They're still optimistic that they can get it in before the end of this year, but they'll probably miss that date and move it into January, February.
Yeah. And one interesting thing about this too, Beth, you mentioned open source before. A lot of all of what we're talking about is open source as well, and it's open source to the level of a lot of these ideas, these recommendations. They're just that, and they're open source recommendations that now the actual node software like Geth and Parity and all these pieces of software that we run that are the literal nodes on the network need to implement these. And that's what's happening now. They're implementing those recommendations, and those projects themselves are also open source. So there's communities of people all around the world working on these projects to implement these recommendations and changes and things like that, which I feel like a lot of folks, especially new to investing in crypto, don't fully grasp that concept that even if you said today that some specific crypto asset is horrible, as long as there's a community of developers and people improving it and building upon it, you can't be static in that mind frame because it's changing, right? So if there is no community and there's no people developing it and it's just dead, then yeah, that's bad. You probably shouldn't be buying into that. But there's a lot of people that are building this, and it's continuously getting better. And I think just for that reason alone, it's extremely exciting, right? It's like this is continuing to move forward and become bigger and better and stronger and all that type of stuff. So that's super exciting from my perspective.
I mean, the ease of use is just, Nick, we were testing Gnosis wallets the other day. And we don't, need to go like download their software or work within their SaaS model or any of this. We just, started playing around with their smart contracts in a test environment that's publicly available. Like the entire infrastructure is already up and available for us to just kind of use immediately.
Yeah, and I think this is going to change how we start businesses too. I mean, I don't know how many folks here have their own business, and this is a little bit of a radical thought for us that do have pretty established businesses, that we wouldn't be like, oh, just put everything onto Ethereum and you're good to go, right? Like that'd be extremely irresponsible. But um, it's starting to emerge where we can start, like Craig and I did it the other day on a test network. We started a smart contract, which is with Gnosis, and it's a multi-signature wallet where we both have to sign transactions within this wallet to approve certain things to happen. So, organizations can start to emerge, and they already have. I mean, we see them out there with a lot of these DAOs where there's large communities of folks that need to come together and agree on things, which is usually very hard to do. But you come together and you agree on things, and you can legitimately sign these transactions and get some type of approval ratio for things to actually move forward. So, I mean, think about that on a really macro level. There could be, like laws in the future can be defined this way. We could be voting on individual laws in Congress as citizens through these types of structures. We're a long way from that, obviously, but those types of technologies are beginning to emerge in this space.
It's funny. We always say we're a long way away from it, but
Maybe not.
you reach something called like escape velocity, where like the compounding efforts of like all of these innovations, it's this parabolic curve where like all of a sudden the things that you were capable of just a week ago have opened new doors that.
Yeah. Well, kind of to that point, any of you guys read about the SEC chairman he's a mega knowledgeable blockchain guy, right? He was like an MIT professor.
Gary Gensler.
Gary Gensler, yes. He's asking for SEC to some type of, I didn't read too deeply into it, but there was something that caused some movements where he was trying to get a little bit more power to regulate crypto markets a bit more. Anybody have any opinions on that in terms of like what that means? Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it?
Well, I don't know what Gary Gensler just said, recently, and asked for, responsibilities. I do know someone just made a statement that DeFi as a concept in general was bad. And that was like a week ago. Someone on the CFTC, I believe, the lead of CFTC.
It's so easy to look at this on the surface and say it's bad, and there are a ton of bad things that are happening. Like I really can't stand all the meme coin crap that's happening and the stuff. And we're kind of in a sense facilitating it. We have a Crate Coin application, but
we tell you not to use it.
Yeah. But I mean, you're seeing this, and it's happening a lot on the Matic network because it's so cheap. Folks are putting out these coins. They're trying to get people to do yield farming against their coins. So they're trying to pump their coins value up to some degree. And then, of course, the people that created it hold most of it. And then once it gets a little bit of value, they just dump it. It's really,
it's a pump and dump scheme, but people do that with stocks. I mean,
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, my thing is, I mean, the whole reason why I got into crypto was I liked the idea that there wasn't involvement, that you could have a certain level of privacy, that it was decentralized. So I guess, unfortunately, the people who go in there and do scamming and are into just make a quick buck, and they're not understanding what the usefulness of the technology is, what it means in terms of a bigger picture, just the fact that data can be exchanged so quickly and processes can be sped up, and a certain level of privacy, and you can trace a transaction. And so let's say people are money laundering or whatever, people, I mean, I didn't read the article, so I don't know where he's coming from. I know I've been on an MIT, they had like a newsletter listserv that I belong to and look at periodically. And I mean, they seem to be they're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of technology. I mean, especially with Ethereum at MIT. So I'm not sure what, I don't know, Craig, what do you think? I mean,
I think they end up making surface statements, right? Like you have these regulators who get put on the spot to come up with a statement, and then they say something like, well, as a whole, I think DeFi is bad. Well, based on what? Well, based on the fact
Exactly.
that I'm not in control of it. So, I mean, it'll be pretty interesting, I think, with El Salvador specifically acknowledging Bitcoin as legal tender as of today.
Oh yeah, that came out the other day. Yeah, I saw that. I read that.
I think that'll
Yeah.
have cascading effects, right? Like everyone, across the market, I look at what people are saying across Twitter and such, and it's like, oh, well, it's just El Salvador, all it is, criminals and if you go there, you just, you're just, if you don't pay taxes, you're going to have to pay extortion fees, because such a, but this is still a nation state, something that United States has formal relations with. It declared its independence from Spain. It's not like, a recognized country that they declared their independence for, an unrecognized country or very small. They are a part of the whole global economic market, and the fact that they're recognizing it, as legal tender and debts must be accepted in Bitcoin. If you're in El Salvador and you run a business, you must accept Bitcoin now to settle debts.
So that was a question I had. What does legal tender actually mean when a country states that? That means that businesses must accept that currency?
You must accept it.
Interesting. Huh. So if you come into a
Same-
shop,
the same way that in the US, vendors must accept US dollars, it is illegal not to accept US dollars. You have the right to refuse service to anyone, but you must accept US dollars as
legal tender to purchase a good or service. Interesting. Now, do you think, I read something interesting. It kind of made sense to me. The idea that we printed so much money in the past year, right? Like an insane amount of USD, like an insane amount, like the most we've ever, like more supply.
35% of total supply.
Yeah. And a lot of these countries depend on the USD, right? As a kind of an underpinning to their economic system, right? And obviously we do too, but I think in a general sense, the first world nations like us are going to probably be okay in a sense. But these guys, these third world nations, or these, poorer nations are going to have a hard time and maybe never be able to get out of this huge hyperinflation that's going to inevitably destroy their economies. Do you think that this strategy by El Salvador is kind of a hedge against that, where they're like,
Yes.
This is something that nobody can control in terms of the supply. So let's get on board with this.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount that I personally don't have the global policy understandings to grasp yet. Like, I think this is extremely significant just from a global market, money movements, money is liquid in the global economy, and it moves across nation states as long as there aren't, strong sanctions and, what's the word, embargoes against a country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, in reality, though, how would a business owner in El Salvador act? Is it all Lightning Network stuff? Like, how would you accept Bitcoin right now? Bitcoin's.
That was my key question. Like, at what point does this rule go into effect? You can't all of a sudden expect like the banana vendor
Exactly.
a Bitcoin wallet and accept payment.
Well, also just the up and down of Bitcoin itself. I mean, the way it fluctuates. One day you're going to pay $10 for a cup of coffee. The next day it's going to be $30.
Yeah.
I mean, how does
I don't see it as a very transactional currency. I still see it as its store of value.
Now, remember when Venezuela was having its economic problems? I somehow
they created the petro, but that was that was a pump and dump at a
okay.
At a government level,
at a nation state scale. They were literally just trying to avoid the sanctions that were placed on them.
So here's an interesting take about Bitcoin that I feel like I've maybe you guys have realized this, and or maybe I'm completely wrong, but I read something that Iran in particular, we have a ton of sanctions against them, right? We don't let them basically sell a lot of the energy that they produce. into a lot of our allies countries, United States and a lot of European countries. But they're also the largest energy producer, one of the largest energy producers in the world. So they have all this energy they're producing that they can't actually sell. So what it seems to be happening is Iran is standing up all these mining operations, and they're getting funding.
And critical is they declared it illegal to own Bitcoin that wasn't mined in Iran.
Really interesting.
Wow.
But now
You can only have Bitcoin mined from Iran in Iran.
wow, interesting. I wonder how they're doing that.
You trace the transactions, yeah, right? Like that's the beauty of this technology is I
Yep.
see it from its
You can
genesis.
see.
Yeah.
Yep,
Wow.
that's it.
But now Bitcoin fundamentally, we say it's a store of value, right? That's kind of like the thing to say about Bitcoin. But thinking about it in that way, Bitcoin really represents tokenized energy in that sense. And they're getting around the sanctions by taking this energy that they're already producing that they can't sell, tokenizing it, and then selling it. So they're monetizing the energy that they're sanctioned and not allowed to sell, but they found a loophole and they're doing it through Bitcoin. And I wonder if like China, Eastern China has a lot of mining operations that they've got a lot of surplus energy that they're now using it for mining operations so they can monetize that energy. It feels like Bitcoin fundamentally is maybe not a store of value, but really a tokenized energy. It's an energy token on the planet, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, the concept of energy and value being synonymous is kind of what proof of work in Bitcoin lives on. So yeah, it's tokenized energy, but tokenized energy is value and value is money.
Yeah. And I guess Ethereum's doing the same thing. But the criticism is like we're wasting a lot. It's not a green coin. It's not doing any good for the environment. But I wonder if that's true. If it's just all this surplus energy that is already being produced, they just can't monetize it.
To that argument, I've always, a lot of people come with that argument, and I always rebut with, if we were incentivized to do better with that technology, with that energy that we are mass overproducing, isn't it our obligation as, humans to do better with that energy, right? Like just because we have it and we waste it doesn't mean it's not a waste. Or like if it doesn't, just because we have it and if we didn't use it, it would go to waste, doesn't mean when we use it, it's not a waste, right? Like we're using it for Bitcoin, I get it. But that energy that they're consuming, we could find better ways to transfer that energy to places that really need it. I don't believe that we couldn't use all of this innovation to do better than just
it's interesting. Why don't we then? I guess it's just a huge coordination effort that there's large.
There's no incentive to.
I think there's also like pretty high cost for that. Like, when they take free energy from gas fields where they're flaring gas, right? And that gas is, I guess it's like federally mandated that there's a certain level of flaring that they're allowed to do, right? And that gas is like totally unused, right? But it still can be used to power diesel generators, which can, power mining rigs. But, as far as using that for better uses, like there's going to be costs. You're not going to pay to set up that infrastructure to make use of that gas.
Right.
And so it's a net loss. And it's like what's that good cause that it's going to? Can they actually pay for that? Can they afford it?
Right.
Whereas like you have this gas, it's just out there. It's going, it's like down to like a federally accepted minimum level of flaring, but still like going to the atmosphere, right? So like Bitcoin is just like sopping that up and making profit and actually just getting rid of like a negative externality.
But if we weren't going to mine that Bitcoin, we wouldn't have to just burn that gas and damage the earth.
Well, I guess, but like you're converting that gas right into into Bitcoin, right? Like it's the gas itself is
100%. And if you can make the argument that Bitcoin is the greater good, absolutely. But if we can find a better way and proof of stake concept of the better way, isn't it responsible to get off of a wasteful mechanism?
I would think so, but then are they going to stop producing that energy? I don't think they are.
Why not? If they're not going to get Bitcoin from it, why would they just?
Why would they do it?
burn
Yeah. Why would they still produce it? I feel like a lot of people are making that argument of they're going to produce this anyway. And why?
Yeah,
Well-
I think with the gas field, it's just like it's a byproduct. It's like it has to be like as they burn off the gas for like their regular gas extraction, there's just waste that they just can't get rid of, and like that's what they're picking off to fuel the mining rigs.
That's interesting. So if that's the case, then it's probably a good use of that. That'd be from
Only if we can't find a better, like if Bitcoin weren't ran on proof of stake, you mean we wouldn't find a different use for that energy that we couldn't replace with a proof of stake mechanism?
Seems like that energy would probably be really localized.
Such as like air conditioning, just I love air.
Yeah.
So you can't replace air conditioning with code.
Yeah, right.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not until we're all simulations. My mind was blown. I listened to a podcast interview by Lex Friedman and Vitalik Buterin the other day. And I, just short of idolization, but, I idolize, he's, one of the most brilliant humanitarians around. And that's just always been on his philosophical and technological aspects. But then he is donating and strongly believes in anti-aging technologies. Like he is literally taking on mortality next.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying and amazing. Like, but he's like, I challenge the concept of we just accept that we grow old and die. And one of his concepts of like, well, can you upload your consciousness?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Totally outside of blockchain. But my blockchain idol talked about how he's going to take on death.
Oh man. Yeah. He's an interesting dude. It's pretty amazing that we have people like that exist, like they're just geniuses. And
we had Bill Gates. I mean, I think that Bill Gates was also, a pretty significant humanitarian and continues to be a significant humanitarian. He just didn't have the power of Twitter at the time and decentralized or, mass communications.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's different though. I feel like with Vitalik, like Bill Gates is a genius capitalist, right? He built yes
a great
and
no
business.
Like look at how much money he's given away. Look at how much good he's done for the world and the Melinda and Bill Foundation and literally going and standing up architecture and foundations for the third world countries. And like they, from a bioengineering, like there's a TED talk of Bill talking about how these viral, the COVID as an example is an immediate upcoming threat that we are not prepared for.
Yeah, no, he definitely called it out. That's recorded.
That's recorded. He called it out, said that this is a threat to humanity. We need to pay attention to it.
I wonder if maybe the environment's just completely different, but I wonder if a dude like that today, selling an operating system, I guess the environment's just completely different. Would he open source it? Like, he obviously back in the day he wouldn't. It doesn't make sense. I remember when I was in college, I was all about open source in college. I thought it was the future. I was right. Yes, the damn accounting professor was wrong. But my accounting professor I get into a little bit of an argument about it. He said, there's no way open source is going to work. It doesn't make any sense. How do you make money? This and that. And like, just didn't see this power of community on the internet and how powerful that really is. Like multiple successful businesses come out of these open source projects, not just one. It's a whole industry can blossom from these things, and it has.
Yeah, that's where you get to make the argument that like utility ascends beyond human greed. Like no matter how capitalistic and greedy that we are, the utility of being able to transfer that information across the world instantaneously is just too high of a utility for us not to grow and expand upon.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's all of those steps.
And it's also
has taken us here, right? With what's happening with blockchain. Like think about the cryptographic breakthroughs, the networking breakthroughs, all of these things that need to exist in order for what we're talking about here to actually exist. It's amazing. It's like overwhelmingly exciting.
It's there was a an article like what's it called, Peter Pan or something like that, Bitcoin Peter Pan, and it talked about the encryption battles dating back all the way through the 70s, like how encryption mechanisms were used, and like the underground anarchists or whatever names they had gone by, and how they fought for this for years. And the moment that those encryption proofs were released upon the world, it was Pandora's box. You can't take those cryptographic proofs and concepts and put them back in the box once they're out in the world. The same way, we remember Napster and other music sharing and what's it called? What's the technology called? I'm drawing a blank on.
BitTorrent?
Yeah, when it takes the pieces of an
BitTorrent, yep.
Yeah, but it's more than BitTorrent. I forget what the technology behind it of like stitching it together, taking it, dispersing it, and stitching it together. But like once something's out there on the internet, it's there forever, right? Like open source is the only way we can go.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that kind of leads me to think about IPFS and how that's coming together. And I'd really like to do more of that. I think maybe have a meetup just around that eventually, maybe sometime this year, later in the year.
Did IPFS exist before blockchain, or not? Probably not existed before blockchain, but was it created for the sole purpose of serving blockchains?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think I want to say yes to that, but
that's what I from what I read, it leads to me to believe yes. But it just kind of popped up, right? Like because I've been following blockchains for forever, and I don't know when IPFS all of a sudden became a thing, but it's a thing.
Well, I went to a meetup, an Ethereum meetup in the city a couple of years ago, and they one of the lead developers of a competing technology from the Ethereum Foundation, talking about Ethereum Swarm, and Swarm is a competing, very similar. Kenneth mentioned it was done before, but can't recall the name.
But was it done to serve blockchains, or was it done because it's a cool concept of this content hashing?
I almost feel like the guys behind IPFS, they're developing Filecoin, right? And that Filecoin is kind of a private network that's built on top of IPFS to incentivize people to basically hold storage on these networks. It feels like to me that layer exists from the initial developer's perspective to serve the building of that business, that the Filecoin kind of empire that those guys are building. But the underlying layer is this open source IPFS structure that we can all use. If you and I wanted to share files, I could say, hey, I'll pin your files, you'll pin my files and stuff like that and run nodes. It seems like Swarm, though, like with a lot of the things the Ethereum Foundation does, it's a little bit more, it feels a little bit more altruistic. I mean, just based on the talk that I saw from one of the developers, it felt that way, where he was trying to solve a lot of this content hashing and all the Merkle tree stuff that they're doing and all the, pretty crazy technical stuff that they're working on. I don't know where that project is right now. I've not seen any buzz about that project in a long time. I think it's still being worked on, but maybe layer 2 and just Ethereum 2 is just kind of taking up a lot of their resources and focus. But IPFS seems to be kind of the underpinning of this NFT, craze that's going on right now for a lot of this stuff.
Without Filecoin, and I don't know if Filecoin is just missing the boat or they're just not ready for to be the infrastructure.
Well, yeah, I mean that leads me to think about how a lot of these NFT platforms are doing. They must be running their own IPFS nodes and just pinning the content, or maybe they are using.
We talked about.
Right. Yeah. And I think you could still integrate with the Filecoin network. It's private though, I believe. Like you have to be accepted to be a part of it right now. I think. but yeah. Anybody buy any interesting NFTs over the past month with the it's we were just doing some analysis on like the aftermarket activity and how much aftermarket buying and selling is going on with NFTs, and it is pretty interesting. There's definitely an ecosystem there for sure.
I forget what the overall market was, but we were looking at Gary Vaynerchuk's VFriends platform, and he's doing 250,000 a day in aftermarket sales.
So you know what I did the other day? I looked, being that this is all open, I love this, right? So you got Gary Vaynerchuk, who is a genius marketeer, right? Like anything, the way he presents things, the way he just builds them up over time through his content piecing and stuff like that, genius. The cool thing about this project is that a guy of that level can do this, and it's all really on chain. So you can look at the contracts, you can see all the volume that's going through this, and you can really see how successful it is. Not just the level of marketing jazz that he's going to ultimately put out. You can say, all right, what are the numbers? What exactly?
It's a straight KPI, right? Like,
yeah,
how much you did of the NFT market.
Right. And it looks like it was insanely successful. There's a contract out there that has like $30 million in it, and it looks like that was the main contract that did most of the minting and the initial sales of these NFTs.
So that contract has when the NFT was purchased, it contracts and sends the ETH back to that main contract.
Yep.
And becomes its its treasury.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's probably not the total, because I'm sure, like we've been exploring how to run how to create a business on Ethereum that does have revenue, and we want to do the right thing. We don't want to be, we have to pay taxes. If we have revenue, we have to pay taxes, and we can't pay taxes in Ethereum. We have to pay taxes in USD.
And you can't take the risk of, well, when I made the sale, Ethereum was at $4,000 a coin, and now it's at $2,000 a coin, but I owe taxes on the amount of US dollar value at $4,000 coin, right?
Yeah.
So if it crashes, I still owe those taxes. So the safest thing for any business to do is at point of sale immediately convert the appropriate portion into US dollar. So
yeah, I'd be curious if this
Gary's ETH in that contract. I'm sure he has he's no dummy. He's not waiting there like, oh, what do you mean I have to pay taxes?
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. And I'd be curious if anybody's on this call or in our community, some of those topics as well, like just accounting in general with this kind of new world and running businesses on these types of, in these environments. Is that right? Like, liquidating right away to USD and basically, it's typically what you do in a business, right? You take a portion and you put it for taxes. So I would think that's the right thing to do, but yeah, it's interesting.
People did it. People sold his NFT for $69 million, and he sold it all for US dollars because he didn't trust that he'd be able to pay the taxes at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay taxes, that's for sure.
Unless you're in El Salvador.
Unless you're in El Salvador, which you see all these people now being like, I'm starting my business in El Salvador. Like, all right. I don't know if we're ready to make that jump.
We'll see who's the next to jump in, but when there's one, there's two.
Yeah.
And there's two, there's four.
Isn't Malta? Is Malta one place where they've been doing for
Malta was the quote unquote headquarters of Binance for a pretty significant period of time. I don't know if they'd call it their headquarters, because Binance always said that they don't have headquarters. They don't have, they don't adhere to any one regulation, but they were very progressive with Binance to try and lure them in. They certainly haven't announced it as legal tender though, because we know El Salvador is the only one that has. But I'm sure there's, like I said, more. I don't truly grasp the significance of it being legal tender in El Salvador. It's the market has acknowledged it being way more significant, more than like Malta is supporting Binance, right?
Yeah. Malta's been a kind of a leader for business in that space for a number of years now. It's definitely attracted a lot of folks to incorporate their entities there.
But not just incorporate their entities there. They actually have to create residency in these other countries because
Yeah.
of the travel rule, right? Like
Mhm.
just because I create a company in El Salvador, if I, as a US citizen, am making a lot of money in my El Salvadorian company, I have all taxes regardless of the fact that, I don't have cap gains. The El Salvador company doesn't have cap gains, but I do.
I think one thing that's going to be interesting also with the NFTs is, royalties, how you get a percentage or commission based on, every time it gets sold, how they're going to figure that one out.
For all time. I mean, that's cool, right? Like, no matter, your estate, everyone's estate will accept the royalty payments long beyond us, right? It's coded.
Well, for me, that is a big appeal of the NFT, especially for artists who many times, write a song, do a video, digitize a script, whatever it is, whatever people are doing, that painting, once it was sold, that's it. They didn't get any more money, but now, hey, guess what? You're on the blockchain.
Yep.
We can follow you.
Yep.
Yeah, no, Nick and I are very strong proponents of the royalty mechanisms and how we like create the sovereignty, I guess, of owning your own value.
Yeah.
The royalties are, we did a lot of research on NFT markets. Most are doing like NFT Nifty Gateway is they do like 5% of every transaction for all time that goes to them, and the artist gets to choose how much on top of their royalty that's coded again for all time within their platform, right? So it's done at the base layer. Like when there's no hey, we're going to write a formal contract or a legal agreement, etc., and then we're going to go code it, right? You're going to code it, and then you're going to write a legal contract to represent what the code's trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the interesting part of that, and we've talked a little bit about this, is the ownership of the actual artwork, and that the legalities behind that, like the idea of like, what if I bought a jingle or something like that as an NFT from an artist, does that give me the right to sell that jingle to Coca-Cola to play in their Super Bowl commercial? I would think
if the artist grants that right? Like when an artist creates an NFT, the artist is responsible for setting the ground rules of the NFT. And if they don't write the ground rules, then there kind of are none. Now, no, they don't own that music if we don't explicitly say that you own that, the IP of the content, because that's not how it works in the real world, right? Like
right. And that's not in the code. So like there still needs to be
legal action.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could see that as like we were talking about, like groups of people owning that stuff, and we're seeing that with some of those DAOs now, where you start these shared wallets, right? These multi-signature wallets, and then those wallets can own assets. So it's kind of like a mutual fund in a sense in the real world, where we can collectively pool our money together and then have invest in pools of assets. The only difference is that there's no real middleman there. Yeah. Guy churning through the oh, thank you. I don't know. It doesn't say who that was. Somebody's dropping off here, I think. And thanks for coming, whoever that was.
So cool. So we've kind of talked a little bit about NFTs. We've talked a little bit about some Ethereum protocols or improvement policies. Any requests on and we've talked about the Bitcoin El Salvador news.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of on time. I think we wanted to keep this around an hour. We are open for suggestions in terms of topics in the future. I mean, I think for any of you guys that have met me before, I like to go on technical tangents. Craig likes to go on some of the business side, so we kind of got a good balance of that here. And we would love to hear from you guys in terms of the topics we want to talk about. If you guys had something you wanted to show or present, we're totally open for that as well. So yeah, just kind of open it up a little bit. Anybody?
Especially for those, we're here on Long Island. We're always interested in particular about projects, efforts, things that kind of promote Long Island. So, be creative, and we all get support one another. I think that's the goal of what we've built here.
Yeah. I think maybe if nobody has a specific topic, I mean, I'd like to throw one in the hat. I mean, I think talking about DAOs would be really interesting. These decentralized autonomous organizations, what they are, what does that actually mean? It's just an acronym for most of us. What the heck does that mean? But I think it's going to play a pretty significant role in the future, and how we all come together in these distributed networks. And we're experimenting with them now. We're kind of just setting some up and just seeing what we could do with them and stuff like that. And
it's a really significant challenge, right? Like, because the only way to run a DAO would be to create a coin of some sort, so that coin can represent people's votes. Because how are you going to gather the consensus of people without a representation of their consensus? And the only consensus that we can think of is those coin voting.
Well, it seems like that's really a popular way to do it, is have a governance token. But once we set up that wallet, a multi-sig wallet, well, I guess that's really for transactions. So like you could have
you can't approve or decline a transaction as a vote.
As a vote. Yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
I was thinking like a community inside of one wallet, but yeah, I guess you could code certain aspects of that in those wallets, like a multi-sig wallet that has like voting capabilities inside of it.
Yeah, but if you're going to do that, why do you even need to do that? I suppose you can just create an NFT for all your DAO members, and if you have the NFT, then you can vote.
Yeah, that's true. Like a voter card.
Yeah, you kind of like stake your NFT. Like, hey, I'm putting my NFT into this contract to vote for a period of X days. But
yeah, that's a whole other. That's another topic too that I would love to have a talk on. Is just voting in general, like voting on blockchain and how that can change things. I mean, the big problem that always comes into my mind is, yeah, voting would work great. I think Vitalik actually just wrote a great blog post about this too. Much more on a much different level than I can say. But the big problem that always comes into my head is, you could spin up a new wallet like that. So what's stopping you from having the double voting problem?
Well, that's a really interesting thing that we didn't talk about, outside of DAOs, is like, how do people feel about registering or recognizing an approved U.S. government approved wallet? Like, hey, wallet 01234, I am officially putting it on the books that is my wallet. And if you do that, you don't get the opportunity to have more than one wallet. You can have plenty of wallets, but you can only have one that represents me and my sovereign identity.
I think that solves that problem. That's where you need to have a government come into play and say, this is your social security number, essentially, right? This is the new, this is your identity.
Which is, that's going to be difficult for this economy, industry to accept, because that's like the antithesis of what we're trying to build here. It's like, hey, we don't need to register to a government to transact and be global, but it's not going to work, right? We still exist in me world. That's why, when people are always talking about wallet security, and like they always say, hey, you can be as secure as you want with your protocols of like, write down your seed phrase, secured in such and such place. But if you're careless as an individual, you're vulnerable to what they call a wrench attack. I have a wrench. Give me your wallet.
Yeah. That's that's interesting. Everyone touts the whole keep your own. If you don't have the private keys, you don't own the crypto. But like, should everyone have that responsibility? It's
No,
yeah. I don't think
no,
so
the
either.
masses aren't capable of it. I don't think.
Yeah.
Not for any, not at the acceleration that we're innovating, right? Like if we had to wait for everybody to catch on the bus, you never
There's
get
there's so many steps involved for people, and I think it's just such an overwhelm, and just even to lots of times just even grasp the basic concepts of blockchain, let alone, you know, having something that is seamless in a way for somebody just to be able to go in and do something quickly. You know, I mean, the idea of having a wallet, being able to have your seed, you know, making sure you have your QR code or your, I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, people have a hard enough time paying their credit card bill. So,
Right.
you know, I mean, I just think it's, that's for me, that's always been a real problem with the technology of it, the technology behind it.
there
There's
will
not
be
an
centralized parties, right?
Yeah.
There has to be centralized parties, but hopefully we've created a technology that embraces good practices with those centralized parties. You know, they can't
Yeah.
poorly because their activities are fully transparent, like, right? Like all the things that they're doing, they're transacting on a fully transparent blockchain. So they can't be such terrible people and stay in business.
Right.
That's at least the hope I have.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hope. But it's just I think for the everyday user, I just think it's so layered, and it feels so complicated. And you know, it's just the
When
appeals, you know,
AOL
that's what
came out,
stopping it.
when AOL first ever came out and we had those messaging channels, I didn't care how TCP/IP worked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No.
I agree, but I don't feel like no one's really, I mean, I guess to me, Coinbase comes the closest, or Robinhood, in terms of, you know, having something, an app on your phone and being able to, but
Just the exchanges, right? Like you're talking only about the market technology, like the ability to send one coin from one person to another, which I'm not trying to minimize, but there's so much more beyond that. So like,
oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't consider Coinbase, you know, to be the only point of centralization. Maybe they are a point of centralization as far as an on-ramp and for the exchange services, but take MetaMask. MetaMask is a centralized point of, you know, authority. That's not an exchange, but we are reliant on them. We are going to centralize. Take Geth. Geth is one of the top Ethereum client, and it's been a risk for the Ethereum protocol that, hey, everyone go try some other clients, because if Geth breaks and everyone's using Geth,
The whole network goes down.
we just broke the network.
Yeah.
And that's why they have, I was just looking up like Nethermind and some other ones that they're just getting. We naturally centralize, and we'll continue to naturally centralize because
I guess it's a human thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, guys. So I think we'll end it here. Unless anybody has anything else to add here, I think we had a good discussion tonight. We'll try to do these, you know, I'm not going to say we're on a once a month cadence right now, but we're, you know, every 1 to 2 months we'll have a meetup.
I think this is the first like open forum we've hosted in a while, and to be fair, it has had the lowest turnout.
Yeah.
But we appreciate everyone that joined us. We try to typically do these like targeted events. Like our last event was a create your own NFT. The one before that was a create your own coin. And, you know, I'd be, you know, I'm optimistic that we'll have some time to do more targeted events, but it's a challenge. And that's why we ended up saying, we haven't talked to our community in a while. Let's throw up an open forum. So
yeah.
That being said, we'll resort to an open forum if we have to again, but we'd like to have some good content and material for everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. So until next time, we'll be connected, and I'm looking forward. Hopefully, next time we get connected, the markets will be a little bit different, and but I know we'll have some interesting things to explore and discuss. That's for sure.
Very cool. Layer 2. That's going to be our next one.
Yes.
on Ethereum. Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
All right, guys. Have a good
Great
night.
night, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have
Thank
a
you.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank-